Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this fourth lecture in the series Women on the Path, organized by the Foundation for Universal Responsibility of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. As part of this series, every month we invite eminent women spiritual teachers and practitioners from various traditions to share their experiences, insights, and teachings. We are delighted to have with us today Amita Mehra, who has been a researcher and practitioner of the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother for the last 25 years. Her spheres of work variously include managing the Gnostic Center, which is a research center for the growth of consciousness and of which she is chairperson, serving on the governing board of Auroville, an international township for human unity, as well as heading a leading horse breeding farm. She has written about and facilitated courses on integral yoga philosophy, integral education, and management. Her spiritual practice and work are based on the dictum, all life is yoga. I would like to begin this evening's program by asking Amita to please introduce us briefly to the path of integral yoga.
Very good evening. Swati introduced me, and as eminent. I'm sorry, that's certainly not an epithet that could describe myself, so I just want to first keep that out of the window, because my own search is ongoing. I'm certainly not a teacher, I am a practitioner, but I am certainly trying to practice. So whatever I say is more in the sense of a student trying to take the journey of life, and more in the sense of sharing and reflections of the way I look at the practice of trying to deepen, heighten, widen one's life. The first question that Swati has put to me, that's part of the reason I refused to give a talk, because I said, listen, I'm not going to hold forth for so long, so we've sort of structured it in a conversational tone, where more of a question-answer thing. So the first question I think Swati's asked is, what is the path of integral yoga? Well, that question alone probably will require 3 books, about series of 10 lectures at least. And Sri Aurobindo himself has written The Life Divine, The Synthesis of Yoga, to explain what is integral yoga, because that is his path. So I'm obviously not going to be able to give you an exposition on that, but I will indicate perhaps what are the main principles, or maybe even what is unique about the integral yoga. I think just a few comments on that is what I'd like to make this evening. One, that integral is not integrated. So there's a difference between integral yoga and integrated yoga. What integral yoga is not is more important perhaps to understand. It is not a bringing together of different parts and fusing it together. It is not a sum of. It is something else. It is, in the sense Sri Aurobindo first used the word Purna Yoga, which perhaps explains what integral yoga is better, because Purna means complete. It is a yoga of perfection, of completion. Completion of what? Completion of the whole of life. It includes life, it engages with life, it battles life. And it is Purna because it is the perfection of all the outer and inner parts of the being and nature to bring them to their fullest fruition, as it were. So there are different elements in integral yoga. There is the path of karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga. There is also Raja Yoga, there is the, and so on. So there are different paths you can enter into the integral yoga. You can go through the purification and the perfection of any instrument of your being. You can start with your heart or devotion. You can start with your mind, the purification of the mind, the refinement of the mind. But whichever path you take, you go through that. And when you open one door of your being, if you have a sincere aspiration to move towards, what should I say, to move towards the divine, then other doors open. And therefore, it is the other English word for the integral yoga, which I prefer, because it's less misleading, is the yoga of self-perfection. It is that there's a huge, about 500 pages of that yoga of self-perfection that Sri Aurobindo has written about in the Synthesis of Yoga. And the yoga of self-perfection is basically, has three elements to it. One is the triple transformation, starting with the psychic realization, going on to the spiritual realization, and then to the supramental realization. The three realizations or the triple transformation is one aspect of the yoga of self-perfection. The second aspect is the fusing, or the kind of, what should I say, the bringing together of matter and spirit. The essence of that is that there isn't a difference between the material and the spiritual. That there is an involution and an evolution. Spirit is the essential consciousness that is infused in all substance and non-substance, being and non-being. And from this spirit, the spirit itself is involved and evolves through different stages of matter, life, so the material, the body, life, which is prana, or you can say plants, animals, so on. Then mind, which is the mental being in all the levels of the mind. And then from mind, of which reason is the highest faculty as yet in human mind so far, there is involved the spirit in mind. And the spirit, when it evolves through mind, brings about a new consciousness, which Sri Aurobindo describes as the supermind, or the consciousness of oneness, dynamic knowledge, power, will, and this higher faculty of the mind, which is called the Gnostic consciousness, or the supramental consciousness, or the consciousness of oneness, or the consciousness of dynamic power in static oneness. There are various ways of describing this consciousness. This is really the goal of the integral yoga, to divinize mind, body, the physical body even, life, and to the highest perfection. And when that happens, this divinization of mind, life and body, then a new consciousness emerges and a new man or a new humanity emerges. So therefore, it is said that Sri Aurobindo's yoga is evolutionary. But it is evolutionary in the sense that he explains that there is an involution first, that then that through the involution the evolution takes place. And this involution is the involution of the spirit that is contained in the very substance of matter, which then evolves. Now, from the practice point of view, I mean, this is the theoretical, philosophical construct or explanation, you can say. But I think what is very, very much more interesting is the practice of it. The integral yoga for a practitioner involves 3 poses amongst many. But the 3 key elements of practice are, as some of you have read the book The Mother by Sri Aurobindo, he writes there that aspiration, rejection and surrender. And aspiration, firstly, the most important element in I think all yoga, not just the integral yoga, is this aspiration of the human soul towards the infinite. This need to understand the meaning of life, the meaning of existence, the meaning of what is the divine, why am I here? This aspiration for completeness, this aspiration for perfection, this aspiration to know, to be, to grow in wisdom, this aspiration for growth. It sees itself in a myriad forms, but this aspiration is the key to the practice of integral yoga. Along with the aspiration comes rejection. Because when you start aspiring, when you call the divine, whether it's an aspiration in prayer, or it's an aspiration in your sleep, or it's an aspiration in works, where you want to offer all your works to the divine, this aspiration also needs a rejection. But rejection of all that comes in the way of your aspiration. So rejection of the falsehoods of the ego, rejection of desires that come in the way and take you away from that pure aspiration for completeness, for fullness, for realization. Rejection of the pettinesses of the human outer nature, jealousies, envy, hate, all the kind of paraphernalia that our outward nature has. So this rejection is a very, very important element. As the aspiration grows, one finds that there is a response from above to that aspiration that brings up the impurities in the nature to one's own eye. And you begin to see how much you need, or one needs to change, how much there is that needs to be purified. So this purification of the instrument takes place because of this aspiration to the Supreme. It calls forth this purification. And for the purification, you need the rejection. And the most important part then, last element, is surrender. Surrender of surrender of all that one is, all that one thinks, all that one feels, surrender of the emotional being, surrender of the mental rigidities, the constructs, the mind's ideas, its preferences. I believe this, I don't believe that. I think like this, the mind's rigidities, rejection of the vital natures, ambitions, its need for fame and name, rejection of all that. For each one it's different. All that one feels from within comes in the way of one's full surrender to the divine. So these three are the three methods or three ways of approaching the integral yoga. If one wants to practice, then necessarily one comes to the three modes of practice, which is aspiration, rejection, and surrender. And then, of course, the element of personal effort and the two most important cornerstones, equality and faith. Sri Aurobindo emphasized deeply and persistently on the importance of equality. Equality of consciousness. What is equality? Equality, in other words, is samatha. This capacity to develop nerves of steel. This ability not to get frazzled despite whatever happens to one outside in one's life, within or without. This ability to stand detached from the outer circumstances, from the storms that one has to weather in life. This ability to become a witness and yet to participate with complete calmness. So this is equality. I mean, there are about, I think, books and chapters on the way of equality. And he describes the different forms of equality. And one cannot overemphasize how important equality is. And then, of course, faith, Shraddha. An absolute faith in one's conviction to walk the path. An absolute faith that there is going to be a response for one's aspiration, and a faith in the power and wisdom of the divine. So I'm just going to leave it there because I can continue on for at least another hour for many, many elements, but those who are really interested in this question can always read the book, The Synthesis of Yoga by Sri Aurobindo.
Thank you, Amita. You've done the impossible, it seems. You have encapsulated very succinctly the juice, the essence of what integral yoga is. And I think, of course, this is just for a beginner's understanding, and to deepen and to really realize all that Sri Aurobindo and the mothers say would take one lifetime or many lifetimes. But in terms of one of the aspects that you spoke about, which is the evolutionary aspect, now those of us who hear it, who have heard of the term evolution more in terms of what biologists say about the evolution of species, that we might find it very interesting that Sri Aurobindo has placed this term in the realm of the spirit. Mm-hmm. So how would you see this, these two aspects?
Well, I think Darwin, when he talked about the biological evolution, I think he got hold of a very important central idea. He obviously caught hold of the tail of the truth, as they say. But he brought it on a very physical dimension, where he talked about the evolution, and then he went on, monkey to man, and so on, and he described it and so on, and there's missing link, and so all of that. But I'm not going to hazard my own views on this right now, but what Sri Aurobindo has commented on Darwin, which I think is interesting, is that he says, it's interesting. He says he's caught hold of some truth, but it's a bit too simplistic. And there are things there are many more things than that. So I think if one looked at it from the highest point of view of Satchidanand, or the Supreme Consciousness, which then manifests into manifestation, there is something that, unless it is already there, it cannot come out. So unless the tree is in the seed, you won't get the tree. But you don't see the tree, do you? And the butterfly, unless it is already involved in the caterpillar, it cannot evolve into the butterfly. There is the element of involution is what Sri Aurobindo keeps talking about, and he says it begins from the highest realm of creation, from the creative principle itself. The supreme brings out its power through creation. The creation itself is the power of the supreme, which is involved in the supreme, which wants to evolve. So from there it goes on to spirit, and it has to be embedded in matter for it to evolve out of matter. So this whole evolutionary theory that we read about is really, I think, a way of explaining in mental terms something that goes beyond the mind, and therefore whatever definition we give by its very nature, especially if we are trying to explain it, unless we talk about it in multiple ways, it will always exclude something, while it is a very inclusive principle.
In terms of our talk today, since it's insights into contemporary feminine spirituality, I wanted to ask you a very direct question about the fact that and very rarely do we see in India, in the Eastern wisdom traditions, that a teacher, a guru of the eminence of Sri Aurobindo, even while he's alive, he sort of gives a very active role to the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of how did that happen, and because she then continued his work. Sri Aurobindo, how does he sort of give such an active role?
Yeah.
What was his thinking behind giving, if he ever shared it, behind giving such an active role in the spiritual community that had gathered
Mm-hmm.
around him, to a woman, to the mother?
Mm-hmm. I see. The mother in Sri Aurobindo. No, let me start with a personal experience, because this is all going to be theory otherwise. When I first came to the ashram in Pondicherry, I was 21, 22, many years ago. A college student, had just gone there for a visit with some teachers. I was just out of college. And I heard of the mother in Sri Aurobindo, and I heard of Sri Aurobindo. Wow, he was a great revolutionary, a teacher. He was someone that we all revered. But I thought to myself, now who is the mother? And there was this question mark in my mind. So Western lady, she has come to India. Have great spiritual capacity, I understood that. But beyond that, I didn't quite understand the mother, and I didn't know who she was. And there was this sort of skepticism and question in my mind. Being very young, I questioned everything. And I walked into the ashram, and again, being from an agnostic background, my parents not exactly, I don't think I went to a temple, but anyway, not exactly open to such things. I didn't quite understand why people were standing around the samadhi, the shrine, and bowing and standing there. So I said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do anything that I don't feel from within. So I walked past the shrine, the samadhi, the center, and I looked the other way, saying that, if I'm not even going to look that side. It was really irreverent, if you could call it. So I was walking the other side, not looking here, going there, and suddenly I thought I was going to fly out of my body. I started feeling very as though something lifted me up. There was some force And I said, oh my God, what is this? It was like being in a kind of a place that's just picked you up. So I hung on, again not knowing anything about spiritual practice. I hung on to the first pillar I could find, thinking that it was physical. I was going to take off like a spaceship. So I caught hold of the pillar and I said, right, I better hang on to this, otherwise I'm going to fly out of my own body. And I caught on to this and I suddenly realized nothing was happening to me and I wasn't flying out of my body. So I figured it couldn't have been physical. And I let go, and after some time, this experience subsided. I went into the inner rooms, and there I saw this big photograph of the mother. And I sat down in front because everybody else was sitting, so I also sat down and I looked at this photograph and I said, I don't know who you are, you better tell me who you are, because I really don't think and I use the word dig, I really don't think I know you very well. So I don't think I can accept you, actually. I said, no, you want to know the truth. So I sat there and I said this to this photograph. And I said, either you show me who you are or I don't think I know you. Suddenly, to my utter astonishment, the photograph changed. It was Sri Aurobindo sitting there. So I said, no, this is a hallucination. So I looked the other way and I said, if I look back, I'm sure this is some trick. Looked back, it was the mother again. And it started like a kaleidoscope, started moving around and round and round, Mother Sri Aurobindo, Mother Sri Aurobindo. The photograph started showing me both the faces. And at that instant, I realized something that later, far, far later, I read in books. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. Who is the mother first? There is no essential difference between the mother and Sri Aurobindo in consciousness. They are, and that is what Sri Aurobindo said, one body or two bodies in one consciousness. This idea, and I'm sorry, and I especially accepted this talk for this very purpose, this idea of this distinction between masculine and feminine, this idea of this separation between man and woman, this idea that even question that how come Sri Aurobindo asked the mother to take charge of everything? Because she was a woman. This does not exist in the consciousness of the spiritual. This is a human construct. And the whole of Sri Aurobindo and the mother's work, their teaching, is a kind of is a radical, what should I say? It questions this. It explains this. It says, listen, there are from the very origin two consciousnesses, or one consciousness. In the expression in the material world, in creation, they take two forms. We call them the man and woman, but essentially in their depth, it is the one. There is no difference. However, in manifestation, they have two roles to play. The feminine, or the feminine principle, which exists equally in the masculine, and the masculine principle that exists equally in the feminine, has two complementary roles to play. That is, the feminine is the executive force, the Shakti. The masculine is the Purusha, the vision, the element of the visionary, the static force. So when Sri Aurobindo gave charge to the mother to look after the ashram, he only acknowledged that she as the executive Shakti, she as the great administrator, the power of creation, needed to look after the ashram and the work. And he as the Purusha needed to do another work, which is he withdrew into seclusion and continued a certain work that he had to do. So this question of feminine and masculine is true as long as we don't get over it. Every ism is true in its some realm, but beyond, if you go into the spiritual realm, you also need to overcome it. So there is this element of truth in it. There is also an element that overcomes it. Now, when we are in the human world, it is very much true, but in the spiritual world, it need not be true. There is the consciousness of identity, and we've all read about it, we've all experienced it, and more, when we experience that consciousness of identity, this distinction of looking at people, my mother is very radical, and I'm sure you'll ask me that question soon. She used to say, I don't look at people as a man or a woman. I look at them as a human being. I look at their soul. I speak to their soul. I don't speak to their body. And I think that is the crux of the whole conception of the spiritual origin of the oneness of spirit that manifests in varied forms. And in the human species, in fact, the mother somewhere said that don't even imagine that nature has experimented only with man and woman. There have been, in periods of history, androgynous and the two in one, and lots of experiments have been done. And this is what evolutionary nature finds it most, what should I say, is best suited for its journey to have this function for a particular purpose. Who knows 500 years from now? We may not have the male and female in two separate bodies. We may have them in one.
Just to revert to what I was asking, for example, Sharada Amma said of Sri Ramakrishna that, I was a diamond in the rough and he recognized me. So there was this whole sort of thing that she said that I did not know myself until he showed me who I was. And we could take it in a spiritual way to mean that he sort of showed her the path to self-realization or whatever. So in that sense, what you said is true, yes, that in consciousness there is no male or female that then takes on the form. But in terms of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, what did he recognize in her? Because obviously there were lots of other embodiments of Shakti, or there might have been. But what was it about her particularly, or was there something that he saw, or was it something that was brought out through his...
See, the mother herself had already gone through a very vast training in occult and spiritual practice. She was already, in her own way, a very a realized being. So there was nothing that he made her realize, number one. Number two, I think what really happened was that they both found that they had work to do together, and he recognized the divine principle of the mother in her, and I think that's why he called her the mother.
In the current context, I think we would all like to hear something about the mother's very radical views on women, especially at a time when there is a discourse, there is an interest in interrogating the space of women and talking about the space of women and attitudes towards women. So, and you have already mentioned that a bit about the mother and her radical views, so if you could share some of those with us.
Just thinking if I can read out a passage, it may be interesting to read something. Okay, I found this interesting because it has some higher thoughts and ideas and principles in it, which is, away from the ordinary way of looking at things. And I always look for something that is deeper and richer, that can enrich one's consciousness. But it is from the self-determination of the free individual within the free collectivity in which he lives that we have to start. This is what the mother is saying. No, this is what Sri Aurobindo is saying, sorry, these are Sri Aurobindo's words. But it is from the self-determination of the free individual within the free collectivity in which he lives that we have to start. Because so only can we be sure of a healthy growth of freedom, and because too, the unity to be arrived at is that of individuals growing freely towards perfection, and not of human machines working in regulated unison, or of souls suppressed, mutilated, and cut into one or more fixed geometrical patterns. The moment we sincerely accept this idea, we have to travel altogether away from the old notion of the right of property of man in man, which still lurks in the human mind where it does not possess it. The trail of this notion is all over our past. The right of property of the father over the child, of the man over the woman, of the ruler or the ruling class or power over the ruled, of the state over the individual. The child was in the ancient patriarchal idea the life property of the father. He was his creation, his production, his own reproduction of himself. The father, rather than God or the universal life in place of God, stood as the author of the child's being. And the creator has every right over his creation, the producer over his manufacture. So too, the subjection of woman, the property of the man over the woman, was once an axiom of social life, and has only in recent times been effectively challenged. So strong was or had become the instinct of this domination in the male animal man that even religion and philosophy have had to sanction it, very much in that formula in which Milton expresses the height of masculine egoism: he for God only, she for God in him, if not actually indeed for him in the place of God. This idea too is crumbling into the dust, though its remnants still cling to life by many strong tentacles of old legislation, continued instinct, persistence of traditional ideas. The fiat has gone out against it in the claim of woman to be regarded, she too, as a free individual being. This is what Sri Aurobindo says about this whole idea of, the patriarchal, the patriarchal system, which is deeply embedded in the human consciousness. The mother says something quite interesting. I think I'll read out what she says. She's quite radical. She does away with all of this. She says, what I object to is the male element and female element. Well, I find that it is not true. And I shall always say, it is not true. There is an element like this and an element like that. And the mother turns a hand from one side to the other. There is an element like this and an element like that. There is an activity like this and an activity like that. But why the devil do you want one to be masculine and the other feminine? It is not like that. This masculine-feminine business is a trick of nature. It has arranged things here like that. So you see, I'm going to tell you, when one descends from above, well, right up there, one has no idea of masculine and feminine and all that nonsense. As you come down and arrive here in the material creation, well, it begins to become something real. So you tell yourself, well, that's how nature has arranged things. Good. But what I say is that these conceptions, these very conceptions, which make one element masculine and the other feminine, this is a conception which has come from below. That is, has come out of man's brain, which cannot think otherwise than of man and woman, because he is still an animal. There you are. And that's how I feel. I have always felt like this. I have said it from the beginning and will repeat it till the very end. And if you don't want to hear me say so, don't speak to me about it. That's the mother. Direct. And she is, minces no words. Very practical, pragmatic. The more you read the mother, the more free you become. That's my experience. The reason I go towards the mother, I gravitate towards her, is because she frees my soul from all the shackles and all the moribund traditions and useless accoutrements, stuff that we collect in our mind and our consciousness, the stuff that goes deep into the subliminal consciousness, and it just throws it out to become free. And yet that freedom comes with a sense of responsibility. It comes with a sense of divinity, but also with a sense of wisdom. But the more you read her, because she says many things, she also very, very beautifully, that's one of the best passages I find. I laughed my head off when I read it. When she talks about the weaknesses of men and women. She doesn't spare women at all. And I think all women, this is actually both quite a mixed audience. So let me read that, because it's just 5 lines and it's fantastic. Thus, she says, thus woman is enslaved to man because of the attraction she feels for the male and his strength, because of the desire for a home and the security it brings, and lastly, because of the attachment to motherhood. Man too, on his side, is enslaved to woman because of his possessiveness, his thirst for power and domination, because of his desire for sexual relations, and because of his attachment to the little comforts and conveniences of married life. That is why no law, please note, the legal system, but that of course is another case. But here she's talking about the problem of woman. She's talking about how do women liberate themselves? How do women free themselves from themselves? And how do men free themselves from themselves? Because both, according to the mother, are free and both are slaves of the other. So it's not something that's only in one and not in the other. That is why no law can liberate woman unless they liberate themselves. Likewise, men too, in spite of all their habits of domination, will cease to be slaves only when they have freed themselves from all inner enslavement. Well, you can continue. This is a full book, so those who are interested, you can read it. It's on women. On woman, it's about, different collections on that.
So in the light of...
Is that enough radical views? Okay.
That's quite all right. But in terms of what the mother says in your own life,
yes.
When you look around you and you look at other women who are struggling or attempting to find their feet on the spiritual path, what do you think are the challenges that still exist?
What? Sorry, I can't answer the question. Start again?
Well, I suppose the mother has really answered all our questions, but I feel that when you look around at other women practitioners and your own journey, what do you think are the challenges that still exist for women on the spiritual path?
On the spiritual path?
Yeah, contemporary women.
On the spiritual path?
On the spiritual path, yes. Or is it just themselves holding themselves back?
I think so. I don't think there are any challenges on the spiritual path. I mean, I don't feel any challenges. I don't feel I'm in any way challenged at all. The only challenge I have is my own weaknesses and my own lack of being able to live what I believe in. And whenever I'm able to do that, I'm that's it. There's no other challenge except my own ego.
So I think now we can take some questions. Yes, please.
Okay.
My question concerns consciousness.
Yes.
On one side, you are saying one consciousness.
That will come up.
And on other side, you are saying new consciousness. Then you are talking about soul. You are talking about spirit. So, we have to be very clear about the concept of consciousness first.
So what is your
Whether
question?
it is one consciousness,
Okay.
is it divisible or is it undivisible?
Okay. Well, this is the eternal question. This is all of yoga that you just asked. Basically, there is one consciousness. That consciousness can be called the supreme consciousness. It's named in the absolute, the unthinkable, the unknowable. Okay, the absolute, the unknowable, the unthinkable, you have to give it some name. That consciousness there is one consciousness, but out of that consciousness, as you come down the hierarchy of creation, or into creation, this consciousness expresses itself into various forms. And this consciousness itself is evolving in creation, not outside of creation. So what you're asking me is being and becoming. Being and becoming are two poises of consciousness. That consciousness, Tat, is the absolute or the unthinkable or the unknowable. Chit and Ananda, the being and becoming of that consciousness, is when you enter creation. And then becomes the whole Srishti, that is creation. Now in creation, when this consciousness enters creation, it enters as an involved consciousness that then evolves.
No, but again you have divided it into one is in abstract.
Yes, there is.
One is in abstract, which is unknowable. So which is unknowable? How we can talk about unknowable?
We can't.
Right? So then we come to only then one consciousness, which is knowable.
Only from your mental point of view.
Not from my mental point of view. Not from. So aren't we mixing two things?
Okay.
We are mixing awareness with consciousness.
So what is your question?
What mental thinking, everything is this? That is awareness, not consciousness. At the level of consciousness,
Sure.
if we talk about one consciousness, then which is undivisible, which is only one.
Problem is, if we use English words, this is the problem with English words. You will have to use Sanskrit word if you want to be very precise. Your
Right.
consciousness is used in English, unfortunately, to describe many things. So
in
you will
Hindi-
have to go back to Sanskrit if you want precise
in
definitions.
Hindi we call it Chetana. And awareness is Jagriti.
Yes,
So
that's all right.
actually, the Chetana which we are talking about, in fact, we cannot describe it in word, whether it is Chetana or consciousness. We don't have a word for it. If it is what it is, right? It is one, we say. It is undivisible, we say. Right? Then we mix that thing with the man-made creation of religion, which is undescribable, everything. So basically my question is, why we are mixing our awareness with consciousness? Why don't we talk about awareness?
Should we take a couple more questions if
Yeah.
there are? And yes.
I know you're not a guru, so maybe
No,
you won't be able
please.
to answer. But I guess you read quite a bit. So you talked about the mother coming from her divinity down and coming into contact with the male and female element as it exists. Now my question that just comes to me very spontaneously is, how, if we go in the reverse, from down to upwards, if you read, what should be methods that we could adopt to try to get out of this trip?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think to go upwards from below, it is first to recognize and to see that there is no division on top. There is no division right above. So when you can feel that and recognize that there is a unified principle on top, then the division or the separation that you see below, you look at it in a different way and you address it in a different way. You don't allow it to become as you know. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
In context of Arvind, I will ask.
Let others also ask. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you.
Just 3 seconds. You were talking about supramental and other things. There was one more thing of Arvind, that was mind of light.
Yes.
Can you throw some light on that mind of light?
Okay, we'll just take another question and then come back to it.
I'm also curious to know what your views are about the whole tradition of Advait, the fact that the Supreme Consciousness is in you and you are part of it, and it's kind of one being, so it's one system, if I could use modern physics kind of terminology, and the integralness of the yogic path. Are these actually very similar things, or are there some distinction between
No, I think there is quite a lot of, integralness of the path. I think there's similar things, I would say, because the Supreme, I mean, from the Upanishads itself, it starts with the Supreme, the Chaitya Purush, exists, is no bigger than the thumb of man, which exists. The Supreme Being is located in the human consciousness or in the human personality, and it is this inner Supreme or inner divinity that pushes human beings to evolve into their greater whole, the greater self. And the integralness of the path, or the integrality, is also to do with this this particular engagement with life, with matter, with the fact that realization of, there is one, that is the realization of the self, the yoga, where you go to the highest heights of your own consciousness, you go to samadhi and you go right on, you go the vertical path. But the integrality addresses both the vertical ascension and the horizontal divinization, I would say. So it's not just enough to practice meditation and to go into trances and to live, to have high experiences, but in life also to translate that into practices of living and of engaging and of qualities and of relationships. So it's an engagement of trying to live divinely. That's why Sri Aurobindo's Integral Yoga speaks about all life is yoga. All life is, he says, secret yoga, in fact. Secret yoga. Because some of us are practicing yoga unconsciously. Some of us are conscious that they are practicing yoga. But everybody in some form, and that slowness and the acceleration depends on how conscious one is. If you know you're going to, and I'll take a very mundane example, going to Nirula's, and you're very fixed that, look, I have to reach there, then you know you're going to take the shortest way, and you're going to be very, very, focused on reaching your destination. However, while you might want to go there, but you get, on the way you see, India Gate, and then you go to the Parliament, and then you say, oh, this is very nice, I want to sit here for a while. And then you forget that you have to reach there. So, and then you suddenly forget that where you're going also. So that's most of what happens in human life. We often have glimpses of the aim of our life, glimpses of where we want to reach, and then somewhere along the line we forget. And then we meander along, wander around, and that also is part of yoga. That's why all life is secret yoga.
Is there any other question? Yes.
Can you give us examples of how you have put this practice into your life?
Okay, I can give you one example. It's fairly recent. While I have been deeply engaged with the practice of integral yoga. Also, I think I realized that I actually had not even. Probably I had just opened the gate to the path. I honestly, I'm not just saying that. Because I had gone to Pondicherry, I just come back last week in fact, I was there over the New Year's. And one of the things that I was praying to the Divine about, I said, I want to give up my business. I don't want to do stud farming anymore. And all the time this keeps going on in my head, that I want to give up this stud farm. I'm only doing this as a means for my yoga, but I really don't want to do this. So I've been praying and praying and praying that, when am I going to give it up? Now I've done my duty to my parents, I've brought the farm to where it is. I have enough, we can, continue with the Gnostic Center work, we can do fundraising, we can do this, we can do that. Then I realized something. That this thing about spirit and matter, that in some way it's still in my consciousness, and it's something we all have in our consciousness. When we look at people who are doing business, we have this, oh, that's not spiritual. When we look at people who are engaged in material life, we say that's not spiritual. We see someone doing charity, very good, very, very good. This is very spiritual, So I suddenly realized I was still doing something in my consciousness that was disintegrated. This disintegration between spirit and matter. This disintegration between service and money. This disintegration between relations with co-seekers, people I was happy with, very happy knowing, happily in our own world, and relations with the business, cutthroat, competitive world. And don't forget, I'm probably in the most competitive industry, where the only thing that matters is winning and getting to the winning post first, and in seconds and microseconds of time. And I also, run probably, one of the best stud farms in the country, but I'm very unhappy doing it. But I'm so competitive in that way that I have to be the best when I'm doing it, but I want to give it up. Now this is another problem. How do you resolve it? You want to be the best, and yet you want to give it up. So I started asking, why do I want to do this? What is wrong? There's something, either you explain to me, or I'm going to shut the farm. This continued. This difference between, or this disintegration, or this difference between the inner and the outer, this difference between charity and business, this difference between calmness, expansiveness, spiritual, meditativeness, and stress. The stress of dealing with everyday competition, life, competitors, work, life in a very, very cutthroat area. This difference between harmony and disharmony. This difference between collaboration, which is very nice in my spiritual, the Gnostic center world, and competition and strife. Now, what do I do? And all this time, for many, many years, I said I'm going to shut down. I would every 3 years put a date to myself. I'm shutting down in this year and this date. Suddenly, I was in Pondicherry. And this is where I talk about the first principle that I started with, aspiration. This deep aspiration of the soul to really know, and this deep surrender of oneself, where you say, I don't know what is best for my life. I don't know what I have to do. But I need to understand, I need to know. What do I do? How do I integrate? What is it that I have to do? And clearly I was told this. You don't have to give up your work. There is no difference in your work. There is no difference between reading horses and beginning a university or doing charity or, serving the poor. There is no difference. The difference and what you have to change, and I was told this very, very strongly, you have to change. And not from anybody, let me tell you, it was an inner realization. You have to change your attitude. Change your attitude towards work. Change your attitude towards how you look at your work. The change is something you have to do within yourself. It's not the outer that matters. You can do the same work with harmony, with disinterestedness, with compassion, with everything that you're practicing. And there is no difference. So this is where I've this example of the inner and the outer, and what I have just gleaned, that I don't have to, it's not giving up outer things that matter, because even if you give it up, you haven't changed an iota within. It's just a hypocrisy. When you change within, anything you do from the outside becomes meaningful.
I have a question. You said we require aspiration, rejection and surrender.
Yes.
3 things. My question is that if we have that aspiration, it's tremendous amount of aspiration that I have, then does this rejection and surrender come automatically, or have I to work hard?
You have to work hard and it comes automatically, both. You get an automatic kind of perception of what needs to change in your nature, in your attitudes, in your life. But you also, then when you get this awareness, this realization or this kind of awareness of what you have to change, then you have to apply your personal effort and your will and your, you have to apply yourself to change it, because it's very difficult to change our human nature. It's like a dog's tail, as Vivekananda said it, but it can be done.
With the aspirations, then what you say, this what you call awareness.
Yes.
Awareness has to be there with the aspirations. Then only you can change yourself.
The awareness comes from when you have a very deep aspiration. It calls forth it opens an awareness. It opens a faculty in yourself of awareness.
That's how
And then that's how the other changes come.
Thank you so much, Amita, for this very enlightening talk and discussion. And thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so many of my friends and colleagues are here. I especially want to thank all of you for taking the time out to come. Thank you.